thanks for everybody who came to this interview. And if you're seeing this post broadcast on YouTube, thank you for watching. Today we are interviewing A.K. Stoltz. I really hope I'm pronouncing that right. She is the author of the Rise of the Witches series. Words. And we're going to talk about her books today. So I'm going to go ahead and give her a minute to introduce herself and she's got and what we'll be talking about.
So, thank you for having me. My name is A.K. Stuntz. I am a fantasy and sci-fi author. My debut series, The Rise of Witches, came out last year with the first book, Witch's Choice, and I just released book 2 this year, Witch's War, just this month.
So, typically I always try to read at least one book before I do an interview. Unfortunately, I only got about halfway through Witch's Curse. So I'm kind of dangling a little bit here. So with the first book, like I said, as far as I've gotten so far, is you have a very mentor trying to find their lost student type narrative where Janelle has run off and ended up in trouble, and two of her teachers are trying to find her before she hopefully gets into too much trouble. Of course, they end up getting into trouble themselves. It's a very multiple POV, a little bit of a twisty narrative, and I kind of one thing am loving so far is that you are kind of getting. I guess the world is kind of jerking the characters around a little bit.
Yes, yeah, the world kind of dictates sometimes where they go.
So, but yeah, I just got to the part where Tamara and Tristan got transported after trying to break into the castle. And
Yeah, that's a good part.
anyway, one thing I did notice, and I actually noticed this right before we went live, is looking at the cover of the second book is like, I don't want to do spoiler questions, but like just seeing the cover, now I have so many questions because it's like you go from in the first book you have Janelle who's, very much a student, she's very much trying to find herself. And then in the second book, you see the cover in who I am assuming is her wearing
Mm-mm.
armor.
It's not. It's actually going to be Tamara.
Okay.
So the first book centers around Janelle and her struggle. The second book deals with Tamara and more of her struggles.
Okay, so it's going to kind of reverse itself in the second book from what it is
Yes,
currently.
yeah.
Okay. So now there is like this isn't a criticism, but it actually gave me a video idea as I was reading your book about me doing a video on how to write magical schools. Like just as someone who's been like in the education system, like every time I read magical schools, I'm like, that's not the way schools work. That's not the way schools work. That's
Right, right. I'm well aware
the
that
only
it
person who would
wasn't,
notice
but
is the
they didn't
teacher.
spend a lot of time in the school, so I kind of thought maybe I could get away with it a little bit.
Yeah. Um, it's just, I mean, even all the way from the beginning, like I really felt sorry for Janelle because it was from just like from reading like the things that she's had to deal with since her parents gave her up
Hmm.
is basically she went to the school, they they lock up her powers, that's in the first few episodes, first few pages of the book. That's not really a spoiler there. And then they basically lock her up for 8 years, and then they're like, okay, we're gonna unlock you now, and you have 2 weeks to figure this out. What all these other kids have years to figure out, and I'm just like, y'all are assholes.
It was kind of almost a setup for her to fail.
That's almost like when I get near the end, that's almost what I expect to see is that they're like, yeah, we never wanted to give her a chance anyway. We just had to because of some laws or something, and we completely intended to screw her over. Like that's current headcanon right now.
Well, I'm not gonna say anything because it's gonna like spoil it, but.
I'm just saying that's where my brain is currently at as far like if she ever does go back. Now, of course, if she goes back, she's gonna be like, well, screw you all, basically. But that's
That
kind of
that
where my
is
head is at this
that's kind of
point.
the attitude she ends up with, yeah.
So, which she completely deserves. Like they were complete jerks to her. They completely
Yeah,
deserve it.
yeah.
So and like the romance, the like kind of slow burn romance going on between Tristan and Tamara right now.
Hmm.
Um, so like part of me kind of figures it's probably not going to get very far in this book, but I fear that's probably going to be a big thing in the second book, or kind of.
Not really. There's not a whole lot of romance in any of them till you hit like the fourth book, which isn't out yet, obviously, but yeah.
Okay, so we're talking like big time slow, big time slow burn here.
Yeah, and it's not because every book focuses on like a different character. So, and you also have to remember that Tamara is actually married.
Yeah.
So,
Did
for
know
her
that.
to really have this relationship with Tristan is,
Yeah,
I don't
it
kind
has a
of,
couple of steps to go through to make her
yeah,
not seem someone you don't want to root for.
right, exactly.
So she got has a couple of steps to go before she's anyway. But like I said, that's that's where I'm at so far in the books, and it's I'm definitely really curious to see what goes on. I would say so far out of all the characters, I would say Tamara I'm probably the most curious about. But I would say my second is actually probably Freya because I got to the part where she may or may not have been sneaking out of the castle at night. So I'm like, okay, what is this girl up to? Kind of. And
Yeah.
she almost has like a nasty meme vibe going on. It's like she was being nasty to Janelle because it was like, girl, you need to get out of here. Are you stupid? Or at least that
No, she's definitely becomes more of a villain. In especially in book two, you really see her personality come out. Freya's. Of course, you see more of Tamara in book two, so you kind of see how they interact and stuff too.
yeah, I'm kind of getting the feeling that there's going to be a bit more of a almost a Grimoire and Nebula type deal going on where like they absolutely hate each other, but maybe there's like a little bit of affection in there somewhere, or not really.
There's a little bit of affection, but yeah, they kind of really butt heads and go at each other, and yeah, especially as the season or the series progresses.
Like, what was kind of what was your motivation to start that? Like, where did the idea come from, and what was your motivation to put it to print?
So originally, this was supposed to be a duology, and it was actually going to be what is now books five and six. But I read an article where an author said that they wrote backstories for their characters to better understand them. And I thought, oh, I can do that. Sure, like a little 5,000 story, for their backstory. And it just kept growing and growing. And I was like, they have such detailed and intricate backstory. I can't just write a short story. So we ended up with, full length novels for Janelle and Tamara and a couple others till you get to the actual five and six books, which was what the series was supposed to originally be.
I actually did that to myself. Is I started writing a book, and then there was so much in it that I couldn't explain in that book without it being very info dumpy. So I started
Mm-hmm.
writing prequels, and the next thing I knew, there I had three prequels, and I was like, "Well, this isn't working." So I ended up completely changing plans and ended up being like, "Okay, the prequel's going to be the first book instead of the book that was supposed to be." And now the first book is book number four. So
Yeah,
I
that's kind of what happened.
I would actually be really curious how many authors that happens to, because I would bet you money it actually happens to quite a few. Because
It might be. I mean, I don't know, but it did. It happened to me. That's for sure.
so I was reading it, and of course now I'm to a part where they got transported to what I assume is another country. So like how expand because it's usually like of course, how big the world is greatly depend on the author. You read some books and the world is very small. You read other books and you have whole universes. So how expansive is this world that they're in? Is it like just a couple of countries, or is it how expansive?
It's more like a couple of countries, more like continents. There's an ocean that separates them, which you kind of see more of in book two, and then obviously this island. We'll call it an island where they kind of get transported to in book one. but it's kind of small. It's not just a huge world.
So there is this kind of like good and evil narrative kind of going on as you have, the gift, you have the gifted school and then you have, the dark witches. Is there like I'm not really like is there like even like any kind of a government structure, anything in Carpo? I think that's how it's pronounced.
Compo.
Compo. Because it's like
I mean, you
spirals
have it's
opposed to.
it's like a kingdom. You have a king, and he rules over this kingdom, and then there's like a wall that separates it from the other kingdom on the other side, which you find more about that in book two as well. And it's ruled by a king, and they just kind of do their own things separate from each other until, well, stuff happens later on.
Isn't that always everything's fine and then something happens?
Trying to not do spoilers here.
Yeah. Um, Sorry, I need to start warning people about that because I'm horrible. I'm horrible about spoilers. Well, it's for me, it's always about how long the book's been out. Like if you're talking like a book that's been out like a year plus, I'm like, if y'all haven't read it yet, y'all deserve spoilers.
That's true.
Also is because it is a very fine line of like, okay, how much can I give out without just making it so that I'm basically just telling people the entire plot of the story, and how much is so little that people are just looking at what I'm giving and they're like, well, that describes 1,000 other books, like, and it basically it doesn't grab their interest and they just kind of scroll off to the next thing. I am I'm kind of in a weird place when it comes to reading books and movies. Is I love having spoilers because the spoilers to me are what is interesting. Like those are it's like, okay, I want to go read this now. And I know not everyone's like that. Some people don't want to know anything at all about a book or a movie before they go see it. I love knowing what's happening before I see it. I'm weird that way. Like I don't like surprises. I'm weird.
I like to have a little bit of surprise. You want to throw a plot twist in there, sure, that's great. Don't tell me beforehand that you're going to do it because then I'm going to be sitting there waiting for it. But yeah, you're right. I think that sometimes we tell too little because we don't want to leave our spoilers. But then that's what makes the book so interesting is all the little details in there. So it's definitely a fine line of how much do you tell.
Yeah, it's trying to figure out that balance between, okay, how much is too much and how much is so little that no one's going to be in. It's what I found. I've kind of what I've been doing. I've been doing a little bit of a study of it myself, where I've been going through like book trailers and book advertisements, and I've kind of been weighing like, okay, which kind of which ones caught my interest, which ones were boring, and why did this one catch my interest, and why did this one not, and kind of
Right.
use that to get ready to do my own promos because it's based, and it's also a matter of, okay, which one got a whole bunch of likes and which one didn't get any likes too. 'Cause so it's like, okay, what techniques can I kind of steal from the not steal so much, but what techniques can I use that this author used that
Yeah.
also get my own stuff noticed.
That's
Um,
kind of how I do too. I look and I see this really interested me, or I like how they did something. How can I kind of play with that into my own stories to, market or promote or whatever you want to say?
so if I'm right, those were the only two books you had out, right? Was just
Right.
the first ones in the
Book
series.
three doesn't come out till next year. So,
So, I did notice on your Amazon profile is there was a book that was out of print or that was unavailable. Was that like just kind of a past failure, or is that just like an old version of?
so it was an older version and I took it off and redid it. And because when I first wrote it, I actually wrote what is now the third book first. And I thought this is going to be the first book in the series. But then as I started writing the other characters, I realized that this was going to be out of order and it's not going to make any sense. So I took it down, redid it, and republished them.
Which has happened. Actually, technically, my first book I technically published 3 years ago, but I realized that the series I was writing for, because I wrote that one and then I started writing the next five, and I realized that it was going in a completely different direction. That would make the first book make absolutely no sense. So I completely
Right.
scrapped it and started all over.
I mean, it happens sometimes. And I think that's where, like, maybe if the whole series had been planned out ahead of time, it might not have happened. But I didn't have it planned out. It just kind of happened. So
So, would you say I assume that you kind of started off more as a pantser, where you just kind of wrote whatever came to mind, and it just kind of went from there. So,
I did the very first book that I wrote, I pretty much pantsed it. But realizing that I was writing a series and I needed to keep all these details straight, and every book had to make sense and had to have its own kind of storyline, I started plotting and I found that I enjoy outlining and plotting and planning ahead of time because, 90% of the time the characters follow the plot, my outline.
because I only really just started doing the same thing is pretty much what I realized is almost any book you start, it's going to initially be pantsing because you don't know any clue what you're writing yet. You get that little spark of information, you just start writing stuff, and you have no idea where it's going to go at that point. But I've kind of come to the conclusion that you do get to a particular point where, especially if it does get past the first book and you're like, hey, this is going to be a series, where you do kind of have to start being more organized about what you're doing. Otherwise, everything just gets kind of lost in the everything just kind of gets lost in the process, and you end up with a big chaotic mess at some point.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you have all these details and they have to make sense from book one all the way through whatever how many you're writing. And if you don't keep track of them, you're either going to have to go back and read your whole book again if you don't remember, or I don't know, wing it, I guess, but you end up with books that don't make sense then. So, yeah.
There was it was only recently there was an author that I read, and we were talking, this was the 16th book in the series that she was reading, and she had misdone a detail that hadn't even been in the series until since I think the third book. And like a bunch of people started jumping down her throat that like, hey, you got this detail wrong. It's like that was like 10 books and 8 years ago.
How do people remember that? Because I'm like, I don't remember every little detail in book one, and I just wrote it like 2 years ago. So it's like, how do you remember that?
Fandom could be devoted. It is scary. It's like, how did y'all even remember that? Fandoms are scary sometimes. Like on one
Oh
hand, I on
yeah.
the other hand, I really don't. Anyway, um, all right. So for certain that there's going to be three more books coming out in the series. I think you said there's
Well,
at least three more.
there's four. There's at least six. I am actually working on book six now, and I'm having a hard time getting the ending because I was like wrapping up the whole series, not just wrapping up the books. So there's all these little pieces that have to fall into place. So it's been more difficult to write this book than it has any of the others. So
So I also noticed that the covers on book one and book two were extremely different. Were you going to like, was there a reason for that? Was it just you ended up with two different book designers, or do you think you're probably going to end up changing the cover on the first book to kind of make them match?
I may eventually, but yeah, I ended up with two different cover designers and it just wasn't meshing, but I liked both the covers. And the same thing is going to probably happen with the third book because I like the cover that I have now, but it doesn't really match books one and two. And I'm like, you know what? It doesn't matter. I'm going to do what I want to do. So it's okay.
I was like, we're not gonna worry about that right now.
No, if it comes up later, I'll fix them so they all look pretty and match. But they all have like fire in them, so that kind of matches.
Sort of match. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and let you do an outro. Go ahead, pimp anything you want to pimp, and we'll close this out.
I just, hey, thank you for interviewing me and thanks everybody who came to watch. And, I hope that you enjoy reading the rest of the book. And if anybody else likes fantasy that's, adventure and not real heavy on the romance, maybe you'd like to give it a try.
And again, just to kind of repeat after her is thank you for anybody who came to watch. Again, if you're on YouTube and you found this post-broadcast, is thank you for watching all the way to the end. To any other authors who maybe see this or find this, feel free to contact me if you're looking to get an interview of your own. I'd be more than happy to have you. I am going to grab her links and put them into the description below. So to find her and her books and everything, just take a look in the description. Also, if you are an author or even if you are a reader, we are currently trying to grow our Discord community. We are looking for everybody from authors, critique partners, alpha readers, beta readers. We're trying to grow our entire independent writing team, both for authors and for readers. So if you'd like to go to my link tree and join us there in Discord, I'd be more than happy to have you. Otherwise, everyone have a nice day.